So the socks and the shirts and that sort of thing would come through the Sanitary Commission, but the Christian Commission would do things like they had a school actually at City Point for United States colored troops. If those men hadn't been taught to read, the Christian Commission would run a school. They would help establish chapels, prayer services. They had stationery that they would give to soldiers and help them write letters home. So, you know, both organizations kind of, little tracts to pass out, making sure everybody's on the right track. But what we've kind of got here is a setup of sort of the jobs of both, because we could certainly come and teach you your basic spelling, but also if you needed to refill your pipe or take a little refreshment, we're set up to do that here as well. So,
Was this established just for the Civil War? Or?
Yeah, both of these organizations came about during the Civil War, and later sort of, like for instance, Claire Barton was pretty heavily involved, and then later it sort of evolved into what became the American Red Cross.
Okay.
But they both begin with those two organizations, and they're entirely, they're all volunteer, and they don't get help from the government. They do it all themselves, but they follow the troops around.
So this is strictly northern?
Yes.
Does the South have anything like this, do you know?
They didn't have any. One of the big differences between a lot of organizations south and north is in the north, it's okay if everything covers all the states and is standardized through the federal government, whereas in the south, you sometimes have instances of Georgia troops needing socks sitting next to an Alabama depot full of socks, but they can't have them because they're Alabama. So in the south, you did have mostly ladies' organizations through churches, but it was much less centralized.
Localized.
Very much more localized, so not quite the same level of organization or the same ability to deliver service.
So with their entire government, yeah.
Yeah. A little bit.
Henricus Historical Park. My name is John. I'm the site supervisor here, the principal historian of the site. And this program is our Civil War program. We do a couple of these a year. The ground you're standing on is the Dutch Gap Canal, very famous during the Civil War. It was an engineering attempt by the Union Army to bypass Confederate defenses all around this peninsula you're on. And so what it came down to is, what can the Confederates do to stop the work on the engineering of the Dutch Gap Canal? So the Union soldiers came in, they set up fortifications first, Confederates shelled them. Various types of things flying at them, and this is one that we found in our garden inside the walls here. This was found about 8 or 9 years ago. This is pretty much a 32-pound shell. It really doesn't weigh 32 pounds, but they still called it that. You can pass it around. Weighs about 28 pounds. Feel free, just don't let it drop on your foot. This was found intact and live in our garden.
I already got experience, so it dropped here on my foot.
All right. But that gives you an example of what some of the types of shells, shell meaning hollow, meaning there's gunpowder. Gunpowder blows up the shell into fragments. That is the most common form of explosive they used against the Union Army here. Shell. All right, so when we found that, the fuse was still in there, gunpowder was still in the bottom, ready to blow up. So back in those days, the bomb squad actually deactivated it for us and gave it back to us. A lot of times now they'll just detonate. Quite unfortunate. So anyway, that all being said, that round would be fired from Battery Sems, which is the power plant, as you saw the power plant. That was a Confederate fort. The Confederate Navy manned that fort, and all the gunners that were in that fort were men that usually fought on ships. So they were used to pulling their guns with ropes, and they still did it inside the fort. But they were good artillerymen. The thing they were realizing is that their straighter trajectory shots coming from the cohorn is meant to fire over the top of fortifications and land behind. So now you have a projectile like that coming well over the tops of these trees, probably close to 250 yards in the air, dropping down around you, just like mortars today. All right, so the range on the cohorns is anywhere from 300 to 500 yards. 300 to 500 yards being effective. You could probably get it farther, but probably won't be a good use. The trick on this, there has to be a fuse in here. And it's not like you see Bugs Bunny like in a fuse where it's like just, you know, kind of like a firecracker. These are actually fairly sophisticated, many times cardboard kind of fuses. They're cut and timed per parts of a second. So how long do you think it would take? Mortar crews are 350, 400 yards over there. How long time of flight do you think it would take one of these to get right here where the workers are? Keep going.
13 seconds.
Yeah, probably closer to 7 to 10 seconds depending upon the range and the trajectory and powder charge. So when you're in the work crews here, in the garrison here, you can hear the mortar, just like today's mortar. It's a very distinct sound. It's like a thunk sound, and you're looking for it because you can see the round. You can see them. And the guards would call them out. And you've got to scramble from where you're working to what they call bomb proofs, which are holes in the ground. And you have about 7 or so seconds to get in there. So that's life working here as a Union soldier at Dutch Gap Canal. Somewhere probably close to 2,000 or 3,000 various rounds are fired at this area you're standing. What we're going to do is the cohorn drill. It's very simple. It's one of the oldest weapons in the world, the mortar. So when you look at that one, and then you go to the field gun is a much more elaborate science. This thing, very crude, and you're going to see that. However, there are certain maths involved, and I'll call out some of those as we go along. All right, so everybody got their fill? Stop. All right, so the crew is a minimum of what you see here. One gunner, that's going to be me, I'm in charge of this mortar, and then 3 crew doing all the jobs. So there's going to be a number 1 man, number 2 man, and technically a number 3 man. The number 1 man here, he has a very sophisticated tool. It's called a stick. Essentially. That will be to pack the powder, and he's also going to be my pointer. So when we have what we kind of do with aiming, they don't even call it aiming. There's no exact aiming on these weapons. You point it, you gauge it, and he helps me with that. Number 2 over here, he's probably got most of the work on this gun right now. He's actually going to run the powder, load the powder, and pull the lanyard. So he's got those various jobs. Number 3, he's pretty much in charge of the ammunition crate, giving the rounds off to 2, and making sure that the sciences of the gunpowder and all these things that are in this box are taken care of. That's his job. My job is to make sure that these guys don't blow themselves up. Back then and today. And then to get this projectile 300 to 400 yards that way in about a 7 to 8 second or so time of flight. And to hopefully land close enough to Union soldiers, probably detonate the round 20 yards above their head, breaks into 8 pieces, tries to kill people. That's the job. Alright. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our positions, alright, post. So we're going to say load, alright, not a lot involved here. He's going to go get a round. The rounds that they use in this type rating aren't even really rounds. They basically use loose gunpowder and pour it down the barrel. Good. If I put a fuse in it, alright, if there's something like a round with a fuse in, the fuse go up. There's gunpowder that gets poured, and there's a projectile like that would go down the barrel. Alright, this is going to be a fake one, so don't worry, we're not really doing it this time. Alright, so now they ram the gunpowder, we put the projectile down. Now we've got to use a way to ignite the gunpowder. So the man here has put a little friction timer, which is like a cap, in there, stretches that lanyard out as tight as he can get it, nods to this man, ready? He turns to me, ready? Fire! Boom! Alright, so that's the drill. It would only take you guys 15, 20, 30 seconds to load a round. That's the easy part. The harder part we're going to show you now, and that is aiming this thing. Alright, remember they say pointing. So let's say we're in the middle of putting the round in. So Luke, if you can pretend to put the rounds in, let me show you what kind of fun this is. Gunpowder goes in, projectile goes in, we ram it, Now, Steve here has to go in front of the gun. Now, what we're going to do is I'm going to basically try to line this up with where we're shooting it. If you offset this by just a ½ inch, you can miss your target by 50 yards. So, all right, last 3 degrees. Good. All right, so we got that line good. We just drop it. We're ready to shoot. If we need to move it, we adjust the mortar. All right, and then we go back to firing. That's it. That's it. I mean, all of it. I just told you everything. So now what we're going to do is show you the actual firing from beginning to end. We will say a ready, and that's going to be him with the lanyard stretched out, and then I will say fire, and this thing hopefully will shoot, no one gets hurt. All right. 11. All right. All right. Whoa! And so I would also have the fuses on. Another fun job. So yeah, okay. 7-second fuse. In goes the fuse. He runs it up. All right, point. Last 2 degrees. Good. Watch the road.
Yeah.
Ready. All right, so I said ready. All right.
Cover your ears.
Fire! All right, let's go to these.
Good?
Today, this is the model 1841 6-pounder. It's cast from solid bronze. During the Civil War, most of the batteries had between 4 guns and 6 guns. Each gun was actually attached to a 2-wheeled cart. If you look at some of the pictures over here, you see the gun is attached to a cart. For transportation, each gun was pulled by 6 horses. They would also have a caisson. If you've heard the Army song, the caissons go rolling along. That's what this is. The gun would carry 1 ammunition chest on the limber. Be filled with ammunition. The caisson actually had 3 more. That's how they resupplied the ammunition. Also assigned to each gun was a battery wagon down here, which was full of tools to service the gun, service the leather harness for the horses. You also had a traveling forge to take care of a typical 4 to 6 gun battery would have about 100 to 150 horses. That's probably the biggest element of artillery that we can't really represent as reenactors, is the sheer number of horses that it took to put a battery in the field. For men, all officers, non-commissioned officers, buglers, horse holders, you might have 100 officers and men just to service 4 to 6 guns. A battery could actually unlimber and bring the gun into action in less than a minute. The firing was all by direct fire. It wasn't indirect fire. If they could see it, they could hit it, depending on the range of the guns. This 6-pounder, it's got a bore of a little over 3.5 inches. Its maximum range is about 1,500 yards. This gun was one of the most used during the Mexican War. It was lightweight compared to some of the other guns. It was easily maneuverable, but by the time of the Civil War, it was starting to be obsolete. They had come up with cast iron guns, wrought iron guns that were rifled. They had immense ranges, out to several miles. And that's what you'll see up and down the river, is the large seacoast guns that were rifled and had a lot of range, a lot of destructive power. Ammunition that these guns shot, there would have been solid shot, just as it says, a solid 6-pound ball, basically used as a giant bowling ball against large formations of troops. or formations of cavalry, things like that. We also, for the 6-pounder, we had shell, which is a hollow cast iron shell. We'll open the box for a minute. Shell was actually is a cast iron shell with a bursting charge in the center. And if you see, this is actually kind of pentagon shaped. They actually was designed to be segmented and fly off into different segments into shrapnel. And that's how we came up with the name of shrapnel. This kind of round was invented by a British officer, and that was his last name. So it was very destructive, useful against counter battery fire if you're firing to other artillery pieces or formations of troops. Close range for repelling infantry. You had a tin canister. The diameter of the bore that would have been filled with lead or iron balls is called canister, obviously. It's like a large shotgun shell. That was against enemy troops that were getting close range, devastating. If they were really in trouble, they could actually fire double canister. They would knock off one of the powder bags. With one powder charge, they'd fire 2 rounds of canister. This gun used fixed shells. Your cannonball was strapped to a wooden block. The wooden block was attached to the powder charge in a woolen bag. When they ram the unit down, they're going to stick a brass, basically a long knitting needle, pierce the round. They're going to put a friction primer, which is a small brass tube filled with powder and a fulminate of mercury. It's got a little wire with a ring on it. One of the men is going to pull the lanyard that's hooked to the ring, initiates the spark, the fire goes down the vent tube and ignites the round. Let's get started here. Stand to find the target. All right, I guess we're ready to run through it. Let's fire a couple rounds for you.